Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show for the week of December 12th, right here on the World Crypto Network YouTube channel. We got a great show for you guys tonight lined up. We got some great topics, including the Bitcoin rally this year, Fed recently raising its hike, recently hiking the actual rate hike this year of 0.25%. And then also I'd like to ask the panelists what we think about Bitcoin, what Bitcoin's going to do in 2017. So some very interesting stuff. Let's get right to it. We got joining us tonight, Steemit's very biggest fan of all, Tone Vase. We got from across the pond, we got Edward, aka Renegade Investor. So thanks so much for joining us. I know it's early your time, man, like 4:30 in the morning. So I'm not actually sure how you accomplished getting on the show tonight, but we thank you so much. We had a guest star or a guest show lined up, guest star Victoria Van Eyck, but she couldn't make it tonight, so we'll get her on a schedule again for another time. Hopefully in February, I think we can get her in there. So without further ado, let's start this show. Let's start talking Bitcoin. We got people in the chat, we got people live, so let's do this. First topic is going to be how I guess Bitcoin. The Bitcoin rally this year kind of crushed every other currency, and I just kind of want to ask the panelists like how they think that this kind of happened, and is this just a fluke? Are we going to see it rally even more? And what other currencies did it actually crush? And is this really significant? Is this really significant to see? So first, we'll go with Tone Vase. What do you think about this, Tone?
Well, I'm not surprised that Bitcoin was up this year. It had that one bad year, 2014. And other than that, Bitcoin's been doing really, really well. I mean, 2015 was the rebound year. We were basically somewhat flat. And this year, we're finally going up. I remember all those articles in 2013 when Bitcoin went up so much, and then all those opposite articles in 2014 when it crashed. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, it went up way too fast in 2013, and it took a year and a half for it to bottom out. And now we're going back up, and I really think that next year is going to be a very good year for Bitcoin. Of course, if we hit some kind of another exponential upwave like in 2013, then it might crash once again. But in general, I'm really looking forward to next year. Bitcoin has had one more halving since that last big rally, which means the supply is getting cut short. People also, I think Bitcoin is also spreading around the world better. People are more familiar with it. And it's way easier to use and get a hold of than it was the last time it had a big run. So I'm looking forward to it. The big question mark, of course, is going to be SegWit. That's the big elephant in the room. I really want SegWit to pass, and but if it doesn't, then it doesn't. I mean, it's what I can tell you for sure is that Bitcoin is not going to hard fork. That I have full confidence in. If Bitcoin hard forks, we got a huge problem. That might be the only thing that gets me out of Bitcoin, and that would be very unfortunate because I'm a diehard Bitcoin guy. And no, this doesn't mean I'm going to an altcoin either. I'm just, I'm not sure what would happen if it hard forks. I have no idea. That's why I'm trying to avoid it. I really hope SegWit gets in. Maybe we need, those transaction costs to go up $1, $2, hell, even $5, and then people will get serious and agree to SegWit because it's not just the best solution we have; it's the only solution we have. It's a combination of both. So that's my real view on it. I don't really pay attention to any of those articles. Bitcoin is now the best performing currency, was the best performing asset. And the reason I don't care about those articles is because those same people were hating on Bitcoin in 2014, saying how it was the worst performing asset. So I kind of ignore these. I also see the dates of, January 1st to December 31st. I see these dates as being totally arbitrary. So yeah, I mean, uh, if you held your Bitcoin in a IRS compliant institution, then you should care about what Bitcoin did during the year. But if you didn't, then you don't.
Very interesting. Yep. I think that you mentioned a couple interesting things in there. I think that Bitcoin will continue with SegWit or not. Obviously, we hope that SegWit gets actually voted in. But as I've heard from a bunch of developers, they can work around it. They really can do some interesting things to work around it. However, we'll still have that malleability problem. And again, even that can be worked around. But we really hope that SegWit is going to get passed because, like Tone said, that is the only solution that we have right now, the only real solution, programmed, tested, ready to go on the net, on the network now. So this is very important to realize and to understand that it's here right now. It fixes awesome stuff, creates, all sorts of opportunities for Lightning Network and other software. So let's just, I just want to overemphasize that again, that's really important. And I'm going to go into some of the reasons that the article said in a second. But first, I want to hear from Renegade Investor over here, Edward. What do you think about this first topic here of the Bitcoin rally that crushed everything? And is it here to stay? Is this rally here to stay, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's something that I actually predicted in November. It's my second video I ever did on my YouTube channel. And I said Bitcoin could hit all-time highs in 2016. And although we're not there, the reasons why I predicted a big price rise all came to fruition. So one of the first was the Chinese yuan devaluation, which literally, I remember Zero Hedge did a really good article on this, and they said, if the Chinese yuan continues to devalue, what's going to happen when 23 trillion in deposits looks for a home? And so what we've seen is because the yuan is devalued, we have seen massive amounts of money in China starting to move into Bitcoin, or at least that's what we believe, because of the trading rate. I think they have 95% of the trading volume, which is absolutely insane. So I think that's one of the main reasons why we have seen it crush every other currency this year. What's interesting for me being in the UK is that we saw a massive sell-off in the pound following the Brexit vote. So for me, it's been an excellent year, having not holding much of my money in the actual sterling and instead holding it in Bitcoin, because obviously when the pound dropped to like $1.20, for me, like my value in Bitcoin was actually surging. So it's a way of protecting against these devaluations, especially when you've got central banks holding down interest rates to prop up the housing market in the UK. So for people in the UK, Bitcoin makes a great hedge against these types of activities, which, the relentless dropping of interest rates and actually more quantitative easing in 2017, which is destroying our currency, or at least the value of it against other currencies. So Bitcoin provides a really good hedge for people in the UK. The other thing that I predicted, actually one of the main reasons I predicted it would crush every other currency, or at least be one of the best performing assets of the year, was the capital controls. And we've now seen that with Venezuela this week, where they've actually began to try to get rid of the Bolivar, some of the Bolivar denomination notes, because they're experiencing pretty much hyperinflation right now, and they're desperate to try and remove as much cash as possible to make sure that they can tax as much economic activity as possible. But I think for Venezuela, the game has pretty much been lost at this point. But before that, we saw in India as well, where they got rid of the 500 and 1,000 denomination notes over there. So yeah, it seems to me that war on cash is going to go nuclear, and it's going to continue that in 2017. That's why I am so bullish on Bitcoin going into 2017. I've really got that sort of 2013 feeling going on. And the other thing I think that I mentioned in my video in why I thought Bitcoin would do really well this year is the bail-ins. And at the beginning of 2016, January the 1st, the European Union put into effect something called the Bank Recovery and Resolution Directive, which means that in the event of bank meltdowns, it allows banks to use people's deposits to shore up their bank sheets if there's viability that the financial institution can be somewhat salvaged. So I think going forward, like, European bank stocks are down on average 44% in 2016. So if you've had your money in banks instead of Bitcoin, like, you've been absolutely annihilated this year compared to the appreciation in Bitcoin. So those are a few reasons why I thought Bitcoin would do really well this year, and it's exactly what happened. But in in addition to that, I think following on from what Tony said as well, the technical picture was looking good because we came out of a long downtrend channel in November of last year, and that's what caused the big rally. And now I think we're in an uptrend channel. And I think by the beginning of January the 6th, we're about to come out of another ascending triangle. So we could have a breakdown, but I think it's more likely that we could see another rally into Q1 2017.
Yep, I think so. And, we're definitely going to talk about 2017 later in the show as a topic, because I really kind of want to dig into what you guys think is going to happen with Bitcoin in 2017. And of course, in addition to just the price. And, some interesting things are happening, as you are well aware, I'm sure, the pound is, the pound completely crashed. I mean, people were talking about volatility with Bitcoin in 2014 or 2013 and into 2014. They were talking about how horrible the volatility is. And here we see all of these currencies just completely just dying, just nosediving, even large currencies, popular currencies like the pound, right? It's not just Venezuela, right? And it's not just India. It's happening all over the world. And when this hits the European Union, I think we're gonna have some interesting things really start to. Maybe you can speak about that real quick, just Edward. Just since you're over there, what do you think? In the immediate time, Bitcoin is doing with the effect. What do you think the effect is having on people over there across the pond? While they're looking at the pound nosedive and Bitcoin soar during this year.
Pretty much everyone in the UK is not paying much attention to Bitcoin at the moment. There's pockets in some of the major cities, but everybody in the UK, we're all about real estate over here. So everybody wants to get in on the housing market, even though the multiples are absolutely insane. I mean, historically, between 1983 and 2000, we had a 3.5 times price to income ratio. So house prices were normally 3.5 times what the average income was. Now, all across the country, it's about 9 times. And in London and Oxford and my hometown of Bristol, you're looking at anywhere between 10 and 20 times price to income, and it's absolutely insanity. But everybody's going all in on this, and the reason it's so high is because there's several government schemes propping up the house price valuations, along with obviously the record low interest rates when we're sitting at 0.25%. So it's caused an absolutely humongous price bubble, and everybody is all over that buy to let rather than Bitcoin. But I think as soon as this crashes, I think the currency devaluation was a bit of a wake up call, because people realize that you can't have all the suppression of interest rates and a strong currency. And eventually, if you're going to sell your house or you're going to try and flip it, then you're going to be flipping it back into that currency. So you got to ask yourself, how much are you actually making on your house when you've got devaluation in the currency? And I think once people realize this and realize all the currencies are falling against Bitcoin, then people are going to start paying attention. But still in the UK, everybody just wants to be a real estate flipper rather than get into things like Bitcoin at the moment.
Yeah, and it does kind of feel like that still over here too. Like you said, there's pockets of people, but it's just really early days. And it's hard to stress this to people who are in the Bitcoin bubble, but this is still really, really early days. I mean, we are on a really early version of Bitcoin. We don't even have Segwit and Lightning Network stuff yet. I mean, it's still very early days. Really is, a lot of people compared this, rightly so, to the internet in the early 90s, right? If not the late 80s, really, at this point, right? With a couple of the coins having command line only interfaces like Monero. It's but I do see, we all see the ecosystem maturing with more and more software experiments happening, like Zapchain, and experiments with tipping and different things. And then we got Yours Network, which is going to do some cool social networking experiments. So there's all sorts of things that are in the flux. But again, we're just kind of building the base layer. All the cool stuff that's going to happen, like with Segwit and additional things that Core has implemented, are kind of a little bit later on up the stack. That's going to take a while to rise up, to be seen in the application layer. We're still kind of building the foundational stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that in 2017. So let's see here. Does anybody else have anything to add? Tone, you got something?
Yeah, I was going to jump back in. I'm trying to pull up my chart. Having minor internet issues right now, taking up all the bandwidth, but I'm sure it's my computer. Yeah, there's a couple of things you guys said that I found interesting that I didn't comment on, but I've commented in other videos. So I don't see that see a huge deal going on with the elimination of physical cash, right? So like what India did, what Venezuela did. However, I don't see India and Venezuela being all that instrumental. I see Australia and Europe doing that as being very instrumental. And even preemptively, right? Like people in Europe are watching what is happening in Venezuela and India, and they're getting ready because it's going to happen to them. And they're the ones that can actually cause some havoc in the Bitcoin market and have it go up. As for volatility, there was a period in time this year where the volatility of Bitcoin was lower than gold and lower than the British pound. So it's really great that the volatility of Bitcoin is lower than some of these traditional assets. And I got a question from the chat saying India not instrumental, question mark. And the reason why I don't think India is all that instrumental, I mean, it's great. I love what Uno Coin is doing over there. I know Sunny Ray, they're doing a great job. They're doing good business. The problem with India is that the average person in India has very little savings. They have very little money. Yes, it's 1 billion people, but 85% of them are poor. And when you're poor, so you'll go out and buy Bitcoin, right? You'll buy $100 worth of Bitcoin to your name, and that's it. To me, the bigger market is the Europeans, a person that has saved 100,000 euros for retirement and has watched the value of the euro fall 25% to 40% just this year against the dollar, right? I think I have a chart somewhere of how much the euro fell against the dollar. So that if that person moves into Bitcoin, that's going to cause some serious price rises. But some guy in India buying 20 USD worth of Bitcoin, that's not that's not sexy to me, right? That's not exciting. What's exciting is Europe panicking, not India or Venezuela panicking. Okay, so my chart came up, and this has been that channel that was mentioned earlier. I've had this channel on here for a while, and we've been hugging the bottom of this channel. I've been wrong on several times, expecting Bitcoin to fall, and it never fell as low as I wanted it to. And there have been several instances where I've already expected Bitcoin to rise, and it's still coming up short. So I am expecting it to get to the top of the channel fairly soon. And I think this was a slightly a longer version of the same chart. And it's the same thing. So I like this cup and handle or triangle pattern here. And above my Fibonacci lines, there's really nothing stopping Bitcoin from breaking out to new all-time highs. I really don't see anything here that's preventing it from going to the top of the channel. So I'm fairly bullish Bitcoin.
Awesome. Yeah. And we were talking about this too before we started the show. We were just like, we don't really see anything that can kind of stop Bitcoin's rise right now. I mean, short of like the US making Bitcoin illegal, like seriously, that might drop the price a little bit, but we just don't see that happening. We see them trying to regulate it. We don't see them making it illegal because we know that if they attempted to make it illegal, it would just kind of explode anyway, even faster in the dark markets and in the underground. So that's not what they want to see. So they want to see control over it. And so they're going to continue to try to regulate it. Meanwhile, we're going to keep evolving it and keep making it unregulatable, right? Is with all of these new amazing technologies like, Tumblebit and Mimblewimble and things like that. So sorry, Tony, you
right.
say something?
I'm not going to debate you now, but I can definitely debate the fact that if the U.S. government is illegal tomorrow, it will raise the price. I can definitely make that argument, though I'm not going to do it now.
Yeah, I think I mean, I've been trying to tell people this too. It's like if they actually made it legal, it would actually raise the price, but people don't seem to agree with that. But I
Look
just tell
what
them to look at the underground markets, like what
I'll just
happened.
give.
Yeah, go ahead, Tone.
No, I will just give a really quick example as to why it will raise the markets. Declared illegal, you would not have this current IRS issue. And I even said this 3 years ago publicly. When you have, let's say, an illicit actor with, 20-30 million dollars of money, want to go into Bitcoin, the fact that Bitcoin is legit and the IRS finds him. If Bitcoin is declared illegal, and safely go into Bitcoin in dollars, because he knows he's already breaking the law to begin with. He doesn't risk somebody ratting on him Bitcoin and he gets put on the radar, right? So
That's a great point. I mean, if it's illegal already, then bam, people are just gonna pour their freaking wealth into it because they don't gotta worry about tracking it or anything. Edward, did you have something to say on that?
No, what I was going to say was funny. It's like when Obama tried to talked about banning guns. Like the gun sales went through the roof. Like literally, people they couldn't have flown off shelves any quicker. And I think that's what we see every time the government tries to ban something. People just want more of it. So perhaps it would be actually really bullish that all these governments come out and try to ban Bitcoin. That's how much legitimacy they're actually losing nowadays. That anything they like straight away just go and do it. But there's two other points I just wanted to bring up on what you talked about previously. The first is volatility, and this argument annoys me so much, and I'll tell you why. The reason that we haven't seen insane volatility in the existing financial system is because the central banks have transferred all the volatility onto their balance sheets now. Like they've gone up 14 trillion since 2008. So all that risk has been transferred onto the central bank balance sheets. Now, everybody who's very much statist or believes in centralized planning, they will tell you, well, that's the whole point. That's why you have central banks, in order to remove that risk. But the problem is something called risk conservation. And it's how do you unwind the risk that is on the central bank balance sheet without crashing the entire financial system? And the thing is, I don't think you can. There is no way you can unwind a $14 trillion intervention by the central banks without crashing the existing financial
they're
system.
Going to try, right, with the IMF and their SDR currency. They're going to try that way, right?
Well, but then you've just got another fiat currency, which the thing is, once you've artificially inflated the demand side for all these financial assets, in order to keep them propped up, you have to continue increasing the demand side in order to sustain the current price levels. So that almost guarantees the future destruction of the currency that's in use, because you need to create the currency in order to support the inflated demand side in order to pop up the prices. And that is why things like Bitcoin, gold, silver, anything that's finite is going to be so popular, and it's such an uncorrelated asset to all these other currencies, because there's no way they can unwind the monetary stimulus without crashing the financial markets. So there's only two ways out of this. Either we have a debt jubilee and a deflationary crash, or we go into hyperinflation. And I think I'm very much on the fence of Mike Maloney here, who believes that we're going to see a brief period of deflation followed by the reinflation trade, which is what I'll get into later when we get into 2017, where I think that the Fed is going to roll back and do QE4, especially because now we're seeing a big sell-off in the US bond market, which threatens a whole amount of different financial assets across the world.
Yeah, let's not get into the whole economics thing, but I pulled up the chart of the VIX, and while the overall volatility has been fairly low, especially right now, we're about to hit a 2-year low in volatility. I wouldn't say that it has been low everywhere, right? I mean, like the British pound and more recently gold, like these individual markets, or like the stock market when Trump was being elected, right? So individual markets have had insane volatility for 24-hour to 7-day long periods that make Bitcoin look like the most stable thing in the world. So individually, and what happened with bonds, just in the last few months, I mean, that's making Bitcoin look insanely stable. So I wouldn't really say that volatility is gone. but when it shows up very, very quickly and in individual assets.
Yep,
I
very true.
think
And
what
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Edward.
Yeah, so one other thing I was going to say, I forgot to say earlier, is that what we're seeing 2016, what really landed in 2016 was the anti-establishment trend. And I think this is really what is going to be driving Bitcoin over the next couple of years. And I think 2016 was really the year this landed, and it had been building for years in the alternate media that had been building this platform in order to take on the existing mainstream media. And so we've seen four big anti-establishment trends. The first is demise of the mainstream media, which has been left absolutely decimated since the election. I mean, these people could not have less credibility if they tried. On top of that, you've got the rise of politicians who are very populist, anti-establishment. You could probably argue that, but we'll wait and see. You've also got obviously the rise of Bitcoin is now doing really well, obviously hitting record high market cap, and succession movements all across the world like Brexit. And we might see that in Spain as well. So you've got this huge anti-establishment wave now, which I think is going to play right into the hands of Bitcoin in 2017.
Very true. So I got a couple of points too to make. So nobody mentioned the halving yet. That's another reason why the price I think went through the roof this year. Why we had the big rally. That was another big point, because that's actually what started the rise, I believe. Because miners have this anticipated into their business. Because they're smart people. They have a business. They know it's priced in every 4 years. Well, not priced in, but it's on their roadmap every 4 years. It's built into the code that this is going to happen. So, they create circumstances for themselves that will hopefully allow them to continue to move. So that includes things like holding on to some extra coins and different things like that. But we know that every 4 years, the price has to double from whatever it is that year, just so that the mining business can stay in business. And that can happen because people continuously believe that Bitcoin is worth more and more and more, because it really is, because we can do more and more things with it, especially as the world collapses around us. So another point would be, a couple of things that we also saw record highs in the 200 moving day average. So that's also kind of huge. We saw 3-year highs on that. And that's really cool to see, because, as Trace Mayer says, that the 200 moving day average kind of weeds out all the noise of the day-to-day noise and stuff like that. And so that kind of gives you a clearer picture of where Bitcoin is headed. And then let's see. Yeah, I think that was about it. The only other point I had really was that about what you said, about what Tone said, is that, it's true. Like, we really want Bitcoin to be for the other 6 billion and the other 4 billion. And we want these people to have Bitcoin, and they're going to have Bitcoin. But like Tone was saying, in India adopting Bitcoin, it's just not going to drive the price up super high, unless the whole country adopted it at once and stopped using gold, right? Like, it's just not going to make that much of an impact in the beginning, as much as huge countries like Europe. And then, like Edward was saying, they just like over here in the U.S., they're just little pockets of Bitcoin understanding right now in the traditional financial markets. People actually haven't realized Bitcoin. It's only been in the news for a few years. This is like nothing. This is to them, to these busy like bankers and to these busy millionaires and stuff, like, Bitcoin popped up yesterday. Like, it's really still kind of new in the minds, fresh in the minds of everybody. So when the big people start waking up, like Europe and US and other big countries, that's where you're going to see the crazy prices. That's, when basically that's what you're going to see right before the governments start actually buying Bitcoin. You're going to see the big countries start to adopt it. And that's really when the price is going to take off. Until then, we're going to really see price increases with the halvings, and then with additional technologies that are added to Bitcoin, like when SegWit passes. I'm pretty sure that the price will raise up a little bit at that point. So, and that was really my only other point. Does anybody else have anything to add on that?
On that topic, like, I worked at a brokerage in late 2013. And I was watching the Bitcoin price just rocketing up every day. I swear some nights I didn't get much sleep because I was just watching this go up. And I felt like the Wolf of Wall Street when he's on the back of the boat with all the mud. And I just literally, I was like, well, how are people not noticing this? I'm surrounded by people in investment. Not one person is talking about this. I'm literally surrounded by 700 people who have dedicated their lives to the investment industry, and not one person was talking about Bitcoin apart from me. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, yeah, it's a fad. And I was like, but the funny thing was, once Bitcoin price went over $1,000, all the media, the big media outlets start covering it. And retail investors predominantly go media, I believe, in order to get investment advice, or that's who they believe, like the Bloombergs, the Reuters, the Forbes, all these kind of establishment financial media. And once they start covering, and once we go over 1,000, believe me, there is going to be such an insane flurry of headlines. One thing I noticed that when this happened in 2013 and the price went over $1,000, like we were on sold and like what I was doing, we started getting emails coming and phone calls saying, can I buy stock in Bitcoin? Because people didn't even know what Bitcoin was, but they're like, what's the ticker for Bitcoin? How do I buy Bitcoin? And I had to explain to them, like, it's a currency and we don't have any investment vehicles that you can do it through with us. But it just showed that once you go through that 1,000, these massive psychological price points that initiates the market tone, it really gets the hype cycle going. And I think the same thing will happen when we go through 1,000. I think that's when people are going to start paying attention again, because even now people still think that Bitcoin sort of died after the big rise last time. I think it's going to be a huge wake up call for people when they see Bitcoin go back through $1,000.
Yeah, that's an important point too. I think that $1,000 is really, really, really an important psychological number for people around the world, especially in the U.S. Once that goes over $1,000, that will have a chain reaction in the minds of people around the world, because now we're starting to talk about prices around gold, and that's just, it shouldn't be like that. They should just look at it now and be like, holy crap, right? But they're not going to. And when the hits over 1,000, that's really going to be the psychological mark where it's going to be back in the media. People are going to be looking at it again. And then from there, of course, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, people are going to stop calling it a fad, just like they stopped calling the internet a fad. But yeah, I still have to call out Paul Krugman on that and how freaking stupid he was saying the internet wasn't going to go anywhere. I swear to God. And now, of course, Paul Krugman is also saying Bitcoin is a fad. It's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, if you want advice, do the opposite of what Paul Krugman says, and you should be pretty good. So if nobody else has anything else to add on this topic, we can move on to the next one. We really appreciate you guys watching. We got 48 people live right now, people in the chat. So if you're watching, please share out the show, Facebook out the show, tweet out the show, let everybody know we're here talking Bitcoin. We're trying to get as many viewers as we can so we can spread the word of Bitcoin as much as possible. That's the plan. Got to keep talking Bitcoin. So we'll move without further ado. I think we can move to the second topic of the evening, which is the Fed rate hike. I have problems saying that, Fed rate hike. Okay, I have problems saying that, but that is that's what I want to talk about here. They did raise it on Wednesday to 25%, which I think makes it a total of 0.5% right now, I believe. So I'd like to have you guys talk about that. I was wondering, basically, kind of from you guys, how is that going to affect? How does that affect Bitcoin? And basically, how is it going to play into what Bitcoin is going to do next year as well? So we'll go first with Tone. What do you think about this rate hike and what it means for Bitcoin?
I don't think it means anything for Bitcoin. I don't think the Fed rate hike means anything for the markets either. Maybe I have a unique view on it. I understand that the markets are go crazy waiting for this Fed decision. I've also been tweeting out this concept of a Fed, which basically states that stock market always goes up the day before the Fed rate announcement and the day of the Fed rate announcement, and not always, but statistically. And those 2 days alone accounted for 95% of all the gains in the S&P 500 the last 25 years. So if you only traded those 2 days for the last 25 years, you've done as well as the market has in the last 25 years, basically. It's very interesting. It's a long paper published by the Fed about 5 years ago explaining all this. So they know their effect on the stock market. But it's also all psychological and self-reinforcing. My view on the Fed rate hike is that the Fed does what the market tells it to do. It's very rare that the Fed goes against the market. Everything is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Fed has been hinting that they're going to raise the rates. So that means that if they raise the rates, the price of bonds goes down. So investors and traders begin selling bonds, or not buying bonds or selling bonds. Same thing. They're not as bullish on bonds. When investors aren't as bullish on bonds, the interest rate goes up because you have to entice other investors to buy these bonds. So the price of bonds goes down, the interest rate goes up. Because the interest rate on the bonds goes up, the Fed has no choice but to raise their interest rate to keep up with the trend that's already happening of higher bond interest rates and higher bond yields. So everything's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think it has absolutely no effect. People think that a higher interest rate is bad for the stock market, and that's completely not true. People will borrow. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, like it's if you can only borrow money at 10% interest, but there's a way for you to make 12% interest, 12% return, you'll borrow at 10% and invest and make 12%. But if someone's lending you money at 1% interest and you don't think you can make 1% return, you're not going to borrow money. So I mean, interest rates are they just go with the market. It doesn't really. I don't think they have that much of a difference now, because the interest rates now starts to go up. There's a huge problem with debt because this debt needs to be refinanced at higher interest rates, and it's a big problem. 70% of America's national debt is cumulative interest amounts, and that's going to be an issue, right? If 70% of our debt is cumulative interest already, and now interest is going up. Also, real estate is going to be a problem. If interest rates are going up, it becomes more expensive for you to take out a mortgage. So to me, this implies that real estate prices are probably going to fall a little bit because a consumer can only afford so much. If they now have to pay more to get a mortgage, they would expect the prices to be a little bit lower because they only have X amount of money. So there's lots of ramifications from a rising interest rate, but I don't think the Fed has any control whatsoever. The market dictates this.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, it is only 25%, but like you said, the markets were just hanging on, the Fed's words of what are they going to do. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but I mean, they were supposed to raise it 4 times this year, and they ended up, of course, only raising it once. So they said they're going to raise it 3 times next year. So maybe they'll raise it none. I guess we'll find out.
Right. But they can also raise it 10 times next year, right? I mean, if bonds keep selling off and the interest rates in America, based on the free market, keep going up, the Fed is going to have to match that with their interest rate. So it's very possible that they can raise it 10 times. They have no idea. A lot of it is just driven by supply and demand on government bonds, and the Fed just tries to keep up with it like a hamster on the wheel.
Yep. And actually, that reminded me of just a quick point as well. When Bitcoin hits $1,000, somebody mentioned it in the chat that that's going to trigger more mining operations, and basically that's kind of what happens every time something happens. One network effect goes, triggers the next network effect, which triggers the next effect, and it just keeps going and turning these flywheels. And one flywheel turns the next and turns the next, and so it's just kind of amazing how we've been seeing this actually play out. Over the past 8 years, one flywheel turned the next, turn the next, turn the next, and here we are today at almost $800 a Bitcoin. So with a huge mining operations, and with the mining now at 16 nanometers already, I mean, it's just kind of crazy. We'll go to Edward for your opinion on this topic. What do you think about the Fed rate hike so far? And do you think it's going to affect Bitcoin or affect even not directly but indirectly? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 ways it's going to affect Bitcoin. I think the first is people are going to realize the collective insanity of having 8 people on a central bank board deciding the entire path the entire global economy goes in. I mean, that is absolute insanity. the fact that you only need to corrupt those 8 individuals to take control of the entire global financial system. And we have seen this is going to be in my new video, and we have seen this throughout history. And it happened, the most close one I can see right now is in the great crash of 1929. And what the reason this happened is because obviously the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, was established in 1913 after a meeting in Jekyll Island, where 3 of the banking dynasties, the Warburgs, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, all went to Jekyll Island off the east coast of the US with government officials in order to establish the Federal Reserve, which is a quasi public institution, which is actually pays their private shareholders. So it's not even a public institution, it's like a hybrid. And they've used it to coerce banking legislative power over the US for decades. And what we saw in the 20s was they increased money supply by 62% from 1922 to 1929. This is what caused the absolute roaring 20s boom, which you obviously see in films like The Great Gatsby. And then what the Fed did was in 1929, they cut the money supply by a third from 1929 to 1933. And that just highlights the problem when you have a centralized institution in control of monetary policy, is that they can dictate inflation and deflation. And once you give that power to individuals, there's no certainty. They can toy with you. They have absolute power over you. And that's what makes it so difficult to invest in the stock market, is that they can pull the rug on this whenever they like. And I think that uncertainty drive interest in Bitcoin, because I actually tweeted the other day, I said, this year, Bitcoin promised to halve in value and the Federal Reserve promised to rate hike 4 times. Which one which one lied to you? And obviously, like, how can you believe forward guidance now at the Fed when they say we're going to rate hike 4 times and they leave it until mid-December to do 1 rate hike? I mean, it's absolutely pathetic. Like, how can they, and it really brings into question their ability to manage the economy when they can't even predict how many rate hikes they're going to do a year ahead. And when they're out by, they only do 1 when they're going to do 4. I mean, that's just absolutely pathetic that they can't even predict how many they're going to be able to do. And it just shows you that, to be honest, I don't think it is incompetence. This is the big debate, whether it's incompetence or whether they are just taking everybody for a ride. One thing, the correlation between how I can explain this to people in the Bitcoin community is when you see a pump and dump in a so-called shit coin, this is when people just pump a shit coin. They'll just get in and out, cause a bit of a hype, and then take profit and then dump it on a load of bag holders. This is what the Federal Reserve is doing on the biggest scale. It's the biggest shitcoin pump and dump you'll ever see. And they will literally, it will be the greatest wealth transfer in human history yet again. And this is what happens every time, 1907, 1929, 1929 to 1933, each time. As soon as they poured a rug on the market in 1929, all the big banking dynasties, they already divested into gold right before the crash. And this is what they do. They pump and dump, and they leave the general public holding the bag. And this is just exactly what you see in the altcoin market when someone pump and dumps an altcoin. It's just the same thing, but on the much more colossal scale. Right?
Can I jump in there? Because you mentioned a couple of dates. So have you done any research on the 1907 financial crash?
Yeah, in my new video.
And what did you point out the cause of that crash? What was it?
It was again the cutting of the money supply.
No, it was actually you should look into the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which was the biggest earthquake in continental US. That was actually the real cause of the 1907 financial panic. I'm sure if you've studied, I mean, I might have studied this a little more than others. I did have a background in geology, but if you studied it even in high school, you would have heard how the fire has caused most of that damage, and it really wasn't the earthquake, it was all the fires. That was a giant insurance scam because insurance companies did not cover earthquakes, but they did cover fire. And most of the insurance companies were on the East Coast. And this being 1906, it was very difficult for them to get across the entire country to check, to verify this. And there's now proof that a lot of the pictures were even doctored. It was like fake, their equivalent of Photoshop, in order to show the insurance companies that the fire did most of the damage. And so because of that, all of the insurance companies became kind of illiquid. It was way too much for them to pay out. It was basically the equivalent of the 100 years later, 2008 financial crash, where the real estate prices dropped and a lot of the companies didn't have the liquidity to cover. So that was the domino that created the 1907 financial crash. And that financial crash was so big that the bankers realized, wait a minute, we may not have liquidity. Again, I have a different view on the situation at Jekyll Island. I don't agree with the Fed, but there are other views to the subject, and that's why I'm kind of raising it here. And I advise everyone to do their own research, look into this. A lot of this stuff is a little harder to find than the usual rhetoric. That book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, while it was a good book, the author clearly had his viewpoints, and he set out to write a book to prove those viewpoints that he had. The other viewpoint that isn't covered in that book is that because of the 1907 financial crash, the bankers wanted to make sure this doesn't happen again and their entire industry doesn't collapse. That's why there's these stories to get out of the 1907 financial panic. JP Morgan, the actual JP Morgan, locked all those other bankers in like his library and said no one is leaving this room until we find a way to pull together like $3 million or whatever it was to bail out these other financial institutions because the government wasn't helping them. And that was the reason why these bankers initiated the idea of a Federal Reserve. And back in 1913, there wasn't going to be anything federal about it. It was going to be a private lender of last resort. And its original mandate, it only had one mandate. It had a mandate to buy commercial paper, commercial bonds, not government bonds. Had nothing to do with the government. They were supposed to buy corporate bonds in order to inject liquidity into the system to bail out institutions during a panic. And this was going to be fully financed by private individuals and these private banks themselves. This was going to be a private institution of the Federal Reserve. They weren't printing money in a way, but they were going to be financed privately, and then they were going to pay those back when those corporate bonds matured and those companies recovered, and that money would have been canceled out of the circulation. So the Fed was initially created by the private sector for the private sector. What happened was, well,
first let me see what I just want to see real quick what Edward thinks so far about that.
I personally think that giving how is it not going to get corrupted when you give that much power to so few people? I mean, take the UK for example, right? One of the mandates of the Bank of England is price stability and to prevent asset bubbles. Okay, so we've now got property in London trading at 20 times price to earnings, and they've just lowered interest rates. So what on earth?
So I think.
I mean, what are they doing?
Let's check it out real quick. I do want to say one thing.
Now we have an asset. We have a bubble. It's stocks, real estate.
Edward. I was gonna say World War I corrupted the institution, and it's unfortunate that the Federal Reserve that was envisioned by JP Morgan never really became realized, because when World War I came around, in order to finance World War I, when the U.S. finally got into the war, 1915, the U.S. government came to the Federal Reserve and asked them to temporarily start buying government bonds to help support the war. This temporary measure became a permanent measure, and the government took over the Federal Reserve. Now that's the problem, and you are 100% right. It got corrupted, but that book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, did look. It's a chicken and the egg situation, but it has to be acknowledged that the original mandate of the Federal Reserve had nothing to do with what it became and what it has been the last.
The one thing I would say on this is that the corruption or the symbiotic relationship between finance and the government started hundreds of years before 1913. So you can try and separate the two entities, but I think there's obviously decisions that are made in government that were obviously influenced by banks before the Federal Reserve. So I think personally, this is why I bet on Bitcoin precious metals, is that I believe that collusion was there before then. It was always there. The fact that the war happened, we were talking about the interwar gold standard, which is what they went to during World War I, which dropped the cover ratio of gold backing the currency to 40% from a majority backing of gold. And this allowed them to create more currency in order to extend the war and actually fund government spending to, buy ammunition, arms, all these types of things. What's interesting is that a lot of these bankers owned the munition factories. And I was actually, during my research for my new video, like these bankers, they made the equivalent of $1.6 trillion in money in sort of current day dollars in money during that period for all the munitions to fund the ongoing war. And that's why I believe that if you create the one pattern that you've seen throughout the 20th century was financial wars, financial crisis, currency war, trade war, world war. And you have to ask yourself, how is this deliberate? I mean, I'm not joking when I say this. Like,
we'll check this out.
Financial crisis, currency war, trade war, world war.
For sure. Let me check this out. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but we do know this. We do know that finance and government has been colluding together for many hundreds of years. They've done many terrible things with this, and we do know that every time something is good, usually we create something good. I mean, everything is created usually for the good intention. That's even how they sell corrupt bills, right? They sell it on trying to fix a problem, trying to do something good. But of course, it gets corrupted because in the end, the government body as an entity always gets corrupted because we centralize power and we turn it into a pyramid. And we know sociopaths, right up the top of that. So I don't want to get too far into that rabbit hole. We kind of know what happened, with that. But yeah, I really do want to thank you guys though for the little bit of the history lesson down that lane, because that's important for people to understand, because there's all sorts of viewpoints thrown down, here and there after it's almost become American like mythology, so I just wanted to get some points in there, and that's good stuff. So, and just going back really quick to what Edward was saying is that even with all their power and stuff of the Federal Reserve, they still can't tell us like how many dollars there are. They still can't tell us how many rate hikes we're going to have. They still can't tell us what percentage they're going to happen. But yet every time Bitcoin has been executing these types of economic functions in real time for 8 years without going down. And not only that, but economic events almost a decade ahead of time when it was programmed, still executed instantly globally across the planet. So that's just some important stuff to remember for people who don't understand quite how Bitcoin works. It does do these. It does have these economic factors that are built into the code that execute years down the line with perfect, basically flawlessly. Now, of course, we couldn't have known that this would have worked back then, right? It was just kind of a guess because obviously they can program it and let it go. But we've seen it now. We've seen it execute. We've seen it work perfectly for 8 years, and so it's just really something to admire and really something to repeat, to let people know. But real quick, any comments on that, you guys?
Just quick, the Fed doesn't know how many rate hikes they're going to have, so they can't really tell you. Like I said, they follow the market. And yes, Bitcoin has been around for 8 years, and it's been executing as it should with code. And the first 4 years count because no one really see now things matter, right? This is why it's hard to even get SegWit in. And by the way, 8 years is young for 100 years, and the Fed got corrupted within the first 3 to 4 years. If World War I would have started, let's say World War II was the Great War, right? And the Fed probably would have had, 10, 20 years before it got corrupted. So there's no saying that Bitcoin isn't going to be corrupted in about 4 to 5 years, right? Like if Mike Hearn gets a hold of it again, if Bitcoin Unlimited developers get a hold of it again, I don't see how that's any different than what happened with the Fed. And that's one of my worries, is that, yeah, it's all great now. Wait till there's some kind of a financial panic in Bitcoin, and all these people that have no business in anything start screaming somebody should do something, and then they hand over control to some entity like the government to control Bitcoin because they're all screaming for the government to do something. That's
No,
your greatest fear.
totally valid point, Tone, and that's true, and that's why I think that even Bitcoin maximalists, quote unquote, as we people may call us, it's important to know that I think most of us are disruptarians, like Andrea says, right? Like we love Bitcoin, but we know that eventually, anytime power gets trying to decentralize as much as possible. But if Bitcoin did get corrupted, which it very may well be in 2010 or 5, 10, 20 years, we want to start a new coin and do something and start over again, right? We want to disrupt Bitcoin. So the idea is to just keep disrupting and do not let power stagnate, and continue to decentralize and continue to decentralize and do that whatever it takes. Decentralize power at whatever cost, pretty much, whatever it takes. So if Bitcoin, gets corrupted, like the beautiful thing is that it's not pre-Bitcoin. So we now have the power to just start up a new coin pretty easily. And again, if it has all of the valid points that the community wants, that the world wants, but doesn't have to worry about government intervention and corruption, well, then they're going to go. People will start to slowly switch over to that as well. So I think that as long as we keep it open source, keep it decentralized, it's going to be really hard to disrupt. But we'll see how that goes.
One more note on the Fed: there's absolutely nothing stopping them at the Fed to come up with straight up metrics, right? There's no reason why they can't automate their rate increase, right? They can come up with a formula. Hell, I can help them put this formula together if they want to call me as a consultant. You based it on GDP, you base it on unemployment. I mean, yeah, we can talk all day about how fake the GDP numbers are, how fake the unemployment numbers are. That's fine, but these are just formulas, right? And these formulas can be self-executing, right? Of course, the government wants to mingle with these formulas and adjust them and stuff, and then view them as they like. But there's absolutely nothing stopping the Fed from putting in code to do everything that they do based on specific metrics. And then they can reevaluate these metrics and then, suggest, changes to the code and see what kind of consensus they get, right? The question is, who should vote on the Fed's consensus? Does the average person, does your average average high school
consensus
teacher,
isn't voting. Consensus isn't voting, right? Consensus is like 95%. Consensus is almost everybody. So that's what consensus means. So if you're talking about voting, then you're not talking about consensus. You're talking about democracy.
No, I mean consensus is right. I mean, like, for some people, consensus is 60%. For other people, consensus is 95%.
Well, for Bitcoin,
right?
for Bitcoin and Bitcoiners, consensus is 95%.
Bitcoiners, it is, right? But for to be our president, it's 51%, right?
Yeah. Welcome to democracy.
Right. So I'm just saying, like, if the Fed wanted to automate everything they do, they can just make a formula based on other formulas on economics, and then you can suggest changes to this formula and see if you can get majority to get this change into the code. The question is going to be, who gets to vote on this formula? Does your average person who's never had an economics class, or do only PhD economists? And honestly, I'm not even sure what's worse, because most PhD economists are Keynesians, right?
I mean,
so
come on, Tony, they're never going to give up this kind of power, right? The Fed is never going to, give this type of voting power distributed out to anybody but the people inside of their marble floors offices, right? I don't.
This is the insanity of it. It's like the Fed has been the most inaccurate economic forecaster in the last decade, and yet no one gets fired. They're like literally gross negligence. No one gets fired. Everyone keeps their job. It just goes on and on. Like how it's just insanity. Like either grossly negligent
No,
or corrupt. Like one or the other. Like how can you be wrong all the time? All the time they make all their predictions are so wrong. Like
there's two professions. There's two professions where you can be wrong every single day and keep your job. One of them is to be an economist, and the other one is to be a weatherman.
And this is why Bitcoin exists, because people are fed up with it. It's just insanity having people who are constantly wrong, running the entire global economy. I mean, it's insanity. They're either constantly wrong and negligent or completely incompetent, or what I think that they're just, I'll tell you who hasn't had a lost decade, the bankers. Is this by accident? You tell me, but that's why I'm investing in Bitcoin, because I'm not taking any chances anymore. Like, I just don't trust them. How can I trust these people? I think
deep down, every Bitcoiner doesn't trust the banks. I think that's why we're Bitcoiners. I think
they're completely untrustworthy. They hate us. Like, I was thinking about this the other day, right? Would you commit fraud against, we're moving a bit on from central fraud against someone that you liked? Like, absolutely not. Would you commit fraud against someone that you don't like? And I was thinking, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't commit fraud against people like that. And yet, what we constantly see is that these people have repeatedly committed fraud against the people that even rescued them in 2008. How much, and that just shows you how much disrespect they have for the general public. And these are all the people, the central bankers drinking $10,000 champagne whilst their economic policies are tearing up the world. Like, it's just insanity. And that's why Bitcoin is going to be so big.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, we always think of Bitcoin, as Andreas says, we like to think of Bitcoin as an exit, and it's an optional, voluntary exit. And you can't really make an exit illegal, right? They can try, but clearly from their wanting to regulate it, they don't want to make it illegal. So, it's just simply it's an exit, and it's going to allow us to exit from the corruption, and it's going to give us a choice. But the problem is, of course, that most people at this point don't understand that they have a choice with Bitcoin, right? But that's the beauty, right? When people wake up to the choice of Bitcoin, that's when, as we're all saying, especially in the first world countries, because the third world countries and stuff, I mean, they're going to notice it first. And we see this. We see the spike in India. We see the spike in Venezuela. We see the third world countries noticing it first because out of necessity. They're going to notice it first. But one day, when a U.S. citizen goes to his Bank of America and tries to withdraw $100 in cash, and it says, nope, only $60 today, that's when really it's going to hit the fan, because that's the only time people wake up. So, but
that's one thing that I was actually going to make a video on this, is that with Bitcoin, you just don't care what these people are doing. Like, we're Fed, we're raising interest rates or whatever. All right, I pay attention to it because I do analysis, but Bitcoin's going to turn bankers into washed up. Who's going to care what they say anymore? Because we're going to be in a completely separate system to them. Yeah, we'll pay attention to it, but they're going to be washed up Hollywood stars. And that's another reason why the bankers are really going to hate Bitcoin, because it's not just money for them, it's their egos, man. They get validation through their, when Jamie Dimon goes in front of Congress with his presidential cufflinks, he's saying, that's for him. That's like an amazing day out. Him getting sending him showing his power with the presidential cufflinks. Bitcoin is going to turn him into a washed up Hollywood star, because no one's going to care what he says anymore. And that's another reason why Bitcoin is so great, because, all right, Fed's going to rate hikes 3 times next year. Do I really care? No, because I'm in Bitcoin. I'm not in their system anymore. And I think that's a really good point, is that you just stop caring what bankers saying, what Mario Draghi says, what Mark Carney says. No,
well, especially as the price keeps going up, right? Every time the price goes up, we care a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less, and
that's Bitcoin is the best. It's like the biggest troll. It's literally a way to troll the most powerful people in the world. It's the ultimate troll machine. It's like a big stick to poke in the world, and there's not much they can do back. And like, we may see something in 2017, but this is just unprecedented in terms of taking on massive invested money interest.
Well, I saw a tweet the other day basically that said something like, the bankers or maybe it was from you, or maybe, but basically said something where maybe it was from Ansel, but basically it said something like the U.S. financial system, or the world financial system, has screwed over people so bad this century, so bad that we had to create the first alternative to gold in 5,000 years.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah,
And
that was you. So you got some good tweets,
it's got,
man. That's why I
yeah.
follow you.
So the coercion of the
But yeah,
state,
it's true.
the coercion of the state by invested money, it escapes money, but the money changes at the temple. This is how long this fight goes back between humanity and the bankers, and I do call it that because I watched another great documentary the other day as part of my research, and it was Steel, and it's a 3.5 hour documentary on just how insidious the coercion of the state by the financial many hundreds of years, and this is why Bitcoin can end that entire paradigm of, I call it the debt and death paradigm, because obviously when fiat currency was created and went nuclear with the repeal of the gold standard through the 20th century, this led to so many wars. So fiat currency, central banking, fractional reserve leads to the conditions which leads to large scale warfare. And all these things could be repealed, pushed back by Bitcoin. And that's why it could be such a great thing for humanity.
Now, of course, we say these things, but we know that we're talking decades and decades and decades and stuff like that that it will take. But this is the only thing that could do that. There's nothing else that really could actually start to take away some of the power from banks. And we know that at this point that most people that work in banks obviously aren't evil, right? They're just regular people that do their day to day. But it's really the people at the top that create. That capture markets, that capture regulations and this kind of stuff. And when that starts happening, they get too much power, and that's where we are now. They just have too much power and they abuse it. And so there's nothing else that could take away their power except for Bitcoin, really, at this point now. It's going to take a while, but we are already kind of start seeing a little bit of the effects in the news, how, we're talking about how like companies like Swift, right, are saying, oh, Bitcoin blockchain, that's years away. That's not going to do nothing. They're already trying to like push it away, because at first they were saying that, Bitcoin, it's nothing. It's just nothing. It's nothing at all. And now they're saying, well, it could be something, but that's years away. So it's just interesting to watch the narrative change. But we went a little long on this topic, so maybe we can go to the next. If anybody's got anything, Tone, do you have anything else on this subject? No. Okay, cool. We can move on. This one's. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we did go down a rabbit hole a bit on this one. Going back to the actual question, one last thing to end on is that we've been in a 35-year secular bull market in interest rates all across the world. Years. And Mike Maloney was talking about when this changes, when these interest rates start to go up, which it looks like it could be now, because there's really not much. Even though that's why you have the war on cash, because they want to implement negative interest rate policy, and the only way to do that is to ban cash, because everyone will have no incentive. But Mike Maloney said, like, in 2000 you had a stock market crash. In 2008 you had a real estate and stock market. The next one is going to be real estate, stock market, and bond market crash when the interest rates turn. And this is a big one, because the bond market is 200 trillion around the world, whereas stocks are only 70. You're looking at an unprecedented financial crash of the likes we have never seen. And when that happens, and this is why, going back to how interest rates or rising interest rates will affect Bitcoin, the only two uncorrelated assets to stocks, bonds, and real estate are really finite assets like precious metals and Bitcoin. We've got $365 trillion invested in all these major asset classes, and that begins to rotate into things like Bitcoin, which only has a 12 billion market cap right now. That's where wealth transfer in human history, and one of the best investments of a lifetime. So that's what's at stake here. If we see a sell-off in stock, bonds, real estate, and you see that capital flow into these uncorrelated assets like Bitcoin, like the sky's the limit.
Yep, for sure.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that, but I don't know if this is the rabbit hole we want to go down.
Go ahead, at least start a point on it.
I think that the crash in bonds and the ending of this 30-year bull market in bonds is going to be the greatest thing ever for stocks.
How is rising interest rates good for stocks?
It's irrelevant. Interest rates are irrelevant to stocks. That's what I said earlier.
What if a lot of companies, they took out, obviously, leverage refinancing operations, and they have to finance that debt that they did to prop up their stock price?
Then they will refinance the debt, but they won't have to prop up the stock prices, because all of these, you like you said, the bond market is 10 times the size of the equity market. So as people are withdrawing this money from the bond market, this money has to go somewhere, and a bunch of it is going into stocks. I don't think these companies are going to have to refinance that debt, because I think their stock prices are going to skyrocket as all these investors are moving their portfolios away from fixed income and into stocks. If stocks continue to make all-time highs, I mean, the bubble is only going to go higher. Yes, we might get the 29 crash, but it's going to come after the 27 to 29 3x fold in the price. Like to me, the doubling or the tripling of the S&P 500 price is way more likely over the next few years than a 50% correction. Now, after a doubling or a tripling of the stock market, then a 3%, then a 50% correction is more possible, and that correction will probably take us down to the current levels.
I'd say the only other variable to this is that if priced in gold, what is the stock market going to be? Because obviously, if you bonds, then we could see big inflation, because obviously if you're refinancing debt at a higher rate, you're going to need to print more money in order to cover the debt plus the interest on the debt. In which case, if gold starts to go up, then if you price stocks against gold, then it could be that we actually see a decrease in real value rather than.
Well, again, right, my counterpoint to that, well, first of all, I think gold is kind of useless. It became useless the day the metal detector was invented. But even so, if the government starts printing a bunch of money to finance the debt, the stock market adjusts for inflation even better than gold does. So if the US dollar starts to weaken, the stock market is going to reflect that, because it's not like Amazon just got weaker. The price of Amazon will probably go up as inflation goes up. What hurts the U.S. economy is a strengthening U.S. dollar, because it makes it hard for us to sell our shit overseas. But again, if everyone is investing into our stock market because that's the bull market, look, we haven't seen a bull market in equities. If you take the chart of equities back 100 years, we've stagnated the last 15 years. We've gone nowhere. And looks like we broke out. And if we broke out like we did in the 60s, we're looking at a 20, 30-year equity bull market. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, again, right, if people are worried about inflation, that means the stock prices are going to go through the roof, because they're adjusting with that inflation. But the stock prices also adjust for basically for society itself. People always like to say that, 1 ounce of gold bought you a suit 100 years ago and it buys you a suit today. That's true. But if you took that ounce of gold 100 years ago, put it in the stock market with dividends reinvested, you can buy 1,000 suits today, because it adjusted for all this technological improvement and inflation at the same time.
It's interesting.
Interesting. Cool. Anything else to add on there, Edward?
No, it's just some really interesting points. I'm going to go away and look at that for sure.
Cool. Awesome. That's what we do on the Bitcoin News Show. We educate the masses. All right. So thanks for that discussion, guys. That was really cool. I think we can move on to our final topic, which should be kind of fun, talking about what Bitcoin will do in 2017, what we expect it to happen. So first we'll go with Tone. Well, we went with Tone with last time. First we'll go with Edward, then we'll go with Tone. First we'll go with Edward on this to mix it up. Just kind of what are your kind of checklists? What do you think Bitcoin is going to do in 2017? What do you expect Bitcoin to do in 2017? And then what do you think it may do in 2017, especially when we have articles like, coming out from Saxo Bank saying that, Bitcoin could triple in 2017, despite the claim being outrageous, quote unquote, from them. And I want you to, maybe if you could, to go into just more than just the price too. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to start with price.
Sure.
I definitely think we're going to see all-time highs in 2017. I can't see much holding it back right now, unless we have some right out of left field and the draconian government intervention right now. But yeah, I think without a doubt, and the reason for that is that the three things that you need for an explosive bull market are lining up. So that's the fundamentals, the technicals, and the market tone. And I think once we go through probably this 800, there's not much between and record highs. And the reason for that is that last time we got up to this sort of price area, there wasn't much time between all-time highs and the price dropping. So very few people would still be sort of waiting to cash out at that price level to try and break even. So once this happens and the resistance breaks, we're going to see an explosive rally, especially when we go through the 1242, because at that point, everybody who's ever invested in Bitcoin and still hold it will be in profit. And when that happens, you ask on the order books on the exchanges. So we're going to see some huge green candles. The other thing that is, I think more precious metal investors are going to start moving into Bitcoin, because I think we're going to see a gold and Bitcoin price parity. And I think it's going to be a bit of a wake up call, especially for precious metal investors who have seen a lot of manipulation in the precious metal prices. And I think eventually they're going to give up and they're going to start moving into Bitcoin big time, because not only does it fit their ideology, but it offers them a much better return than holding these assets that are currently being insanely manipulated, which has just come out this week with like the chat rooms between UBS and Deutsche Bank. So this is like actually proven manipulation right now. I'm really glad that we're seeing the end of the blockchain hype as well, which leads me on to my next prediction, which is, I think because the banks have not been able to compete with Bitcoin in a free market with things like R3CEV, now we've seen a lot of vaporware, a lot of money wasted. There's nothing that is actually competing right now with Bitcoin, which is surging in value. That the only way they now have to compete with Bitcoin is to use this force of the state. Complete coercion of the state. So they're going to use their state's monopoly on violence in order to go after Bitcoin with things like regulation and lobbying the state to push back on Bitcoin. So I think because attempts to compete with Bitcoin have failed, and this is kind of damning for the financial industry as well, because it shows not only did they crash their banks in 2008, showing that they can run secure, safe financial institutions, but now they can't even compete with Bitcoin, that they're going to do what everyone does when they fail with that, which is, well, not everybody, but they're going to go to the state in order to try and start Bitcoin. So we could see from the state in 2017. Whether that will, I don't think it will stop Bitcoin. It may slow it down a little bit, but even then, I still think we're going to see all-time highs in 2017. And the other thing I think we're going to see is still this war on cash. And one thing that I saw recently was Kenneth Rogoff, who was the ex-IMF chief economist, and he's also part of Fed governors. But he came out the other day and he's talking about, he's got a book called The Curse of Cash. And I thought, so why is this guy pushing for? And I said, well, he must be in bed with the bankers. So the first thing I do when I hear people talking about getting rid of cash is I Google their name and put Davos at the end or Bilderberg, and lo and behold, these are guys who go to Davos, they go to Bilderberg, they're behind closed doors, they're with the biggest financial powers in the world. Then they come out, they use their positions and prestige in order to push the agenda of the banks. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So I think we're going to continue to see a war on cash, which is going to be absolutely bullish for Bitcoin, which is essentially digital cash. And I know he was on Twitter the other day, and I said this to him. I said, you lost the war on cash when Bitcoin was created in 2009. And I think a lot of them are going to wake up to this, but they're still going to push for the war on cash, which, the war on cash is totalitarianism dressed up as a moral crusade against crime. And it's like, well, no, if you're going to centralize all the power in the banking system without referencing the biggest financial crimes they've committed in the last 8 years, then how can I believe your moral argument against the war on cash when that's happening? So I think that's going to be one of the big drivers for Bitcoin in 2017. And yeah, it's going to be people like that to drive it, So that's the three things I think. Maybe I'm hoping that we see a Bitcoin ETF as well. We've got things like Coin, which the Winklevoss brothers are creating, and also SolidX, which looks to be one that could be insured by Lloyd's of London as well. So if we see an ETF, I think Trace Mayer did a really good interview on Dennis's channel the other day, the Bitcoin Report. And he was talking about how the ETF could create a massive amount of liquidity that will bring new use cases into Bitcoin. And I really like the idea of that. So I'd love to see an ETF in 2017, even if it's an ETF with some restrictions to limit the risk, because obviously that was something that I think we talked about when we were last on the show, how an ETF is risky when you look at the security concerns, especially like we've seen with the exchanges. So maybe if there's a way to launch an ETF with limited risk or limiting the amount that can go into it at first, maybe that would be really bullish for Bitcoin in 2017 as well. And I would love to see a major retail outlet, because as soon as someone like Amazon adopts Bitcoin for payments, it will start the process of margin compression on all other retailers that don't accept it, because obviously you can save 2.5% by processing a Bitcoin transaction over the credit cards. So that will allow Amazon to lower their prices even further. So once you get a big massive retailer accepting Bitcoin, it will start the process of margin compression for all the other retailers. So those are the sort of things I would love to see in 2017. Whether that will happen or not, ways to be seen. But those are some of my predictions for 2017.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I definitely want to get a couple of mine in too. But first, let us go with Tone. What do you think is going to happen to Bitcoin in 2017, Tone?
Oh man, I am expecting the price to go up in 2017. I did write an article of like 3 years ago that I was expecting a major event to take place in August of 2017. So we'll see as we get closer to it. Hopefully we'll go up high enough into August so that if there is a crash, it will still keep us above $1,000 per Bitcoin. Other than that, I'm not so much looking for Amazon to accept Bitcoin. I honestly have a completely different view. 2% credit card fees because I own a business and I couldn't care less. I have a, Groupon takes 30% from me. So do I really care about a 3% credit card fee? So it's I have a slightly different perspective on those things. And but something like Netflix being able to open their product to a region like Africa because they just can't give those people monthly accounts due to credit card fraud. Not necessarily it's not necessarily a fee issue, but more like Netflix can provide an a la carte service for their content. So something like that would be really, really cool. Expecting an ETF. I don't even want an ETF. I think it would be problematic. So I'm not really looking forward to that. And if an ETF does get approved, I would actually be very, very nervous about that ETF because I don't have confidence in the Winklevoss twins that they would be able to protect the Bitcoin underlying that ETF if they plan to hold on to that Bitcoin, nor do I trust them. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I do think that this ICO craze and this altcoin craze, I think that's gonna die down. I think Zcash was the last of the bunch, and I think regulators will come down on this mess. I just want to share my screen for a second. Here. Are we on? Yeah, that's my blog. So it's in publications. So here, there was an article by Barry Silbert where Barry Silbert predictions for 2017. It's taking so long to load. Here we go. And one of his predictions, there it is. And he's actually quoting one of my tweets.
Nice.
That tweet was, I'm fully expecting like the SEC to come down hard. I'm still expecting several of the Ethereum founders to get arrested. And I think that DAO only made this worse. And that was point number 4 on Barry's list, is that the SEC is going to come down real hard on these ICOs. And it's kind of ironic because he's an investor in Zcash, right? So it's which to me is like another ICO. So it's a bit ironic, and I also have many questions about his ETF. Apparently, his pretty much is an ETF. I don't really see much of a difference. So, real predictions. I do think that SegWit would get passed. I don't think it's not going to get passed this year. I think in 2017, SegWit will get passed, and we will see first beta tests of Lightning Network, and hopefully that would create some micropayments. I also see the spread of CryptoLocker continuing to grow at 100% per year. So I see those kinds of things. And the elimination of cash. The euro is going to get rid of the 500 note, maybe the 100 note, and that would be great for Bitcoin. I don't think the US is going to eliminate cash. I don't think much would implode economically. I am expecting the euro to completely disintegrate as a currency, but that's probably more 2018 than 2017, and that would be absolutely great for Bitcoin. Probably the greatest Christmas gift a Bitcoiner can ask for. So those are pretty much it, and I think like I said, the altcoins, I think people are going to wise up. And once Bitcoin does hit parity with gold and starts making new highs, I think people are going to jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon, and all these altcoins are going to be like sold to hell, especially once SegWit gets in. I mean, I think that Roger Ver called the bottom really well in Bitcoin's percentage dominance by market cap over versus all of crypto space. Bitcoin was in the 95% range in like 2013, and then it fell all the way down to 75% dominance by market cap of Bitcoin. And ever since 75%, it started to go up, and it's now at about 86%. And I think we're going back to 95%.
Yeah, very interesting to see that Roger did call the highs, but of course it's ironic, and reason why it's interesting is because it's ironic, right? Because what he called was, he specifically said was that 75% market, Bitcoin dominance market share. Basically, he was saying that this is a continuing trend. We're seeing altcoins start to take away the market share of Bitcoin, and this is going to continue if Bitcoin doesn't increase the block size and all that kind of good stuff, right? We saw that that he was basically saying that this is going to continue really continue for many months to come. And what happened was, actually, like Tone said, he ended up just calling the bottom of that DOM index. Bitcoin DOM index started rising almost immediately after he said that. So that is kind of funny. But of course, all sorts of things started happening too, with the DAO and with Ethereum and even today, I guess, Ethereum, some up-to-date news, Ethereum's forum got hacked today. So I mean, just one thing after another for that team, I tell you. But yeah, so I have a few predictions myself too. Basically, just on the price topic, basically, I do believe that last year was 2015 was the last year you would get Bitcoin under 500. I think that this year is the last year you'll get Bitcoin under 800. And I really think that next year is the last year you'll get Bitcoin under 1,000. I mean, from next year and on, we're talking over 1,000. From next year and on, 2018 and up, basically, we're definitely looking at gold parity and higher at the very lowest. So in addition to the price, what happens with that price is that starts new flywheels, right? Like we were talking about earlier. Once it hits that certain price, that kickstarts some other economic effects, which then kickstarts some other economic effects, and this is just going to snowball into just this huge change that we're seeing, this huge penetration of Bitcoin across the planet that's really going to start flying in once these flywheels start hitting. In addition to that, I think next year like some of the panelists already mentioned, the technologies like SegWit, Lightning, Tumblebit, all of this stuff is going to really start to happen. We're going to start to see widespread testing of the Lightning Network. We're not going to see widespread like mainstream use of it or anything, but we're going to see widespread testing and widespread use case scenarios of the Lightning Network. For if anything, from yours network to Kim.com's Mega, all sorts of different things have already been kind of said that they're going to start launching in 2017, and we haven't even heard, we haven't heard the stuff that hasn't been spoken yet, right? So I think there is going to be a really good deal of Lightning Network testing in 2017, really kind of proving that it's going to hopefully be the path down to millions of transactions a second. So in addition to that, I think we're going to see the even more widespread use of anonymous cryptocurrencies. I think Monero is going to get a pretty nice bump next year because I don't see anything else kind of taking its place in terms of really anonymous crypto. It's really kind of getting the most traction, and it's kind of my favorite anonymous coin as well. I really like the current provider or the current caretaker of the coin, Fluffy Pony, right? He's a great guy on social media. He's super honest. I mean, you can't really find a nicer and more honest guy than that guy. He really is cool. He goes a little bit overboard on Andreas a couple times, right? But we still, for not mentioning Monero enough. But hey, Monero we all know Monero at this point from its price rise. So that's going to continue. I think we're going to see a bunch more implementations or a bunch more sites taking Monero. So that's good. So we're going to see the rise of more anonymous crypto. In addition to that, I think we will see a financial crash of some variety next year. It's going to be, if it's not going to kickstart, the huge world global crash, then it's definitely going to get real close. We already saw crashing earlier this year in January and February of all sorts of markets in China and Japan. And we saw the bond sell-off that's happening right now with China, and it's just kind of getting crazy. So next year, we're really looking for some kind of crash like that that's going to drive more people into Bitcoin. And then you guys also mentioned the ETFs. We're looking at least one ETF launching, I think, next year. I mean, I think we got to get at least one launched next year from the amount of work that people have put in to get it launched. I mean, the amount of lawyers and the amount of money that's been spent so far, I really hope that they at least launch one next year as kind of a test bed. I don't think it's going to like take off or drive Bitcoin to tens of thousands of dollars of Bitcoin in the 1 year or anything like that. But at least we'll be able to start testing these ETFs and testing the security of these ETFs, right? Because we know that what happened when something just like Bitfinex went down, we saw a pretty big crash, like of $100. Well, if a freaking multi-$100 million ETF gets hacked, you could expect the price to go down a little bit. But the market, Bitcoin market is getting better and better at absorbing these types of things. As more and more liquidity gets put into it. So that's going to be really cool. And one more thing is, I think definitely have to agree with Tone on this, that the crypto locker is going to spread like wildfire, people. You need to 2FA your stuff. You need to back up your hard drives. If you hold significant amounts of Bitcoin, you need to, right away. I mean, come on, 2FA, and not 2FA with SMS. Let's get that clear, people. Everybody needs to 2FA, but, not with SMS. 2FA to your local device, encrypt, backup, and then encrypt that back up. I mean, whatever you got to do. The biggest things is to just back up your hard drives regularly, and then 2FA all your accounts, because it's going to get real heated with Crypto Locker as Bitcoin price rises. Crypto Locker will spread even faster, if you can believe it. Like it's already spreading like crazy, like Tone said, like hundreds of % per year, but it's going to spread even faster as the price rises. And the old internet that we have currently continues to collapse, right, with DDoS attacks and things like that, until we start creating these new encrypted internets with these new encrypted protocols. Blockstack, MadeSafe, all of these different things. There's a bunch of them out there, but we're going to start seeing that happen in 2017 as well, because we know our current internet is really broken, and Crypto Locker is going to just really break it even more. It's going to really put it to its test. And so we really need to, so I think that's going to be really big in 2017, that discussion about new decentralized internet, recreating the internet, that's going to get even bigger. And finally, the war on cash, like you guys already said, Edward, it's just going to accelerate in 2017. It's going to get even more hardcore. We can see that now between India, Venezuela, Australia, we can see that we're now in the thick of the war on cash. We're in the thick of it, right? So that means that now it's going to start being accelerated next year. and that is clearly the agenda of the world governments and banks. They want a cashless society so that they can have more control. Now, of course, they're going to use the same old reasons as always. Gotta stop the terrorists, and of course, in Australia's case, they use the excuse, oh well, nobody was ever really using cash, so we just said, we're not gonna support it anymore. I mean, they're gonna use ridiculous things like that, and of course, yes, in first world countries, yes, we don't use as much cash, but I mean, come on, that's not a reason to just completely just stop servicing cash completely. That makes no sense, except for, of course, if you want to have more control over the people's finances. So that's kind of my bit. Somebody in the chat said, hey, terrorists are bad. Yes, they're bad. But, we've seen all sorts of things with capital controls that, that Bitcoin has provided regulatory, arbitrage for. Because remember, sometimes the things that are legal that Bitcoin can buy are drugs, right? But sometimes the things that Bitcoin can buy that's illegal is food. Right, freedom and things like that. So it's going to be a double-edged sword, and it's going to be really awesome to see Bitcoin just kind of cut through the regulations and really hopefully allow people to start really saving some wealth for their next generation, because generation after generation just keeps getting owned by the banks. Greece every damn decade. I mean, it's just getting really bad. We just saw the videos today that went viral of people looting in the street of Venezuela. And again, they're not looting. You don't see these people carrying out TVs, right? You don't see these people carrying out stereo systems or anything like that. What they're carrying out is bags of freaking food, okay? Like the little bits of toilet paper that's actually left in the country. Like it's just kind of in turmoil. And so we just hope that Bitcoin can find them. And, we look at the local Bitcoin charts and we see that every single country that's being completely destroyed right now by central banking and printing of fiat and these crazy regulations and these denominations of currencies, we can see that all of these countries that are happening, Venezuela, India, Australia, all these places, we can see that the local Bitcoin's volume is just ratcheting up. So we know the word's getting out, but it's getting out at a trickle. So we just, we're just going to continue to spread the word of Bitcoin, continue to talk about it here on this show, and hope that other people talk about it too. And so, just try to bring the word of Bitcoin to everybody. It will reach everybody one day. It will. I have no doubt of that. It's just a matter of time. So we're just going to do our best to keep it going. Now that I'm kind of done ranting, do you guys have any points on that to say? I see Tone's got a screen up.
Yeah, no, I mean the only thing to say on your statements, I take the other side of the Monero bet. I don't think those Anon coins are all that useful, so I don't see a bright future for Monero. I think the price is going to go down like everything else in the altcoin space. And no, I just want to pull up this. I tweeted this out like about a month ago. This is when I pointed out the notable exits of Mike Hearn. Zoom this in or something. The notable exits of Mike Hearn, creating Bitcoin XT, and then rage quitting right before the price took off. And Roger Ver starting his days talking about how the crypto world is going to move on without Bitcoin, and how the trend of Bitcoin's dominance continues to fall. And he sent these things around these areas, and now we're going up, and I think we're going back up to 95.
And just so the audience knows, like you tweet out these charts, I believe, right, Tone? So if you guys want to see charts like this that Tone creates, definitely give him a follow on Twitter. He recently changed his name from Tone_LLT to Tone Vase to make it easier. So that's just an update for everybody too, because Tone does tweet out a bunch of funny stuff, a bunch of good stuff too, like these charts here, but also some funny stuff on Steemit. It's good. So I highly recommend giving him a follow.
I had to change him. I was starting to get nervous. I'm like, all right, someone is about to get the tonevase.com domain and then try to extort me for it. Someone is about to get the Tonevase Twitter and extort me for it. So I'm like, you know what? I need to just secure those myself.
Good idea, you know, because as you know, Tone, I mean, just like I was kind of in my rant there, like next year when the price rises, it's just going to bring all sorts of attention to Bitcoin people, you know, not just Bitcoin people, but Bitcoin in general. And it's just going to, you know, for better or for worse, going to bring a lot more attention. And we've already seen, you know, kind of high level profile people get hacked, like that one investor got hacked for his Augur coins, I believe. So, you know, we're starting to see it already, and it's going to get really interesting in 2017 when the price goes up even more. So everybody, you know, I'm telling you right now, this is the time to protect. If you're still using a wallet on your actual computer, make sure to just back that shit up on a USB, encrypt the password, or buy a Trezor and just get it off your PC. Get the keys off there. Do not have the keys on your computer. You got to get that shit off there. So just, you know, FYI for everybody, because it's really going to get intense. And also, another prediction is because, you know, because the price is going to be so kind of crazy next year, anybody you've ever talked to about Bitcoin is probably going to call you up. Also be prepared for that. Because when we reach new all-time highs, when we reach that psychological level of $1,000, people that you've told Bitcoin about, you know, that have completely dismissed it, like everybody that I talked to in the whole world almost, they will probably be calling you back and, you know, asking you about Bitcoin. Hey, what's up with that Bitcoin thing? So just be prepared for that. And when the shit rises over $10,000, well, then you really got to start shutting up about Bitcoin. Because my plan is really to start shutting up about Bitcoin like after $4,000 or $5,000, because, you know, after that, like, Bitcoin has penetrated the world. Okay, like, I don't need to have my face associated with Bitcoin anymore. Like, you know, but yeah, so it's going to get real fun. So everybody needs to buy a Trezor. And speaking of a Trezor, real quick, we will have Elena on from Satoshi Labs, I believe, on the next show. So real quick, let me just get the date of that. Yeah, that'll be hopefully the 2nd, January 2nd, or the 16th. The 16th, sorry. She'll be on the 16th. I don't think we're going to do a show on the 2nd because it's a little bit too close to the 1st. So actually, I think I'm going to take that show off. But Elena will be joining us January 16th. Founder and CEO, I believe, of Satoshi Labs. So that's going to be fun. We'll talk Trezor and all sorts of different stuff with her then. But yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Is it really the 16th? We're going to be in Miami, actually. She's there and I'm there for the event in Miami.
Awesome. Maybe we can get you both on there at once. That'd be fun. In the same shot. That'd be cool. So then before we go real quick, though, I actually wanted Mr. Renegade over there to explain a little bit more of his latest video, because he's got a video coming out and he does these really awesome videos. And, you know, we had him as a guest on the show before where he explained some of his videos. But, you know, I really have to encourage you guys to check out these videos again, because they're really fun. They're really great. And the biggest thing about them is that they explain Bitcoin to normal people. That's kind of the biggest thing that these things do. They explain it to normal people, while the Bitcoin people still get to, like, get it. We still get to get it. We still get to have a laugh and still get to understand it. But it really is some great videos. And I just real quick just wanted you, Edward, to just talk about your newest one and when that one's coming out.
Yeah, so basically my new video started off as 2 separate ideas. So I'll give you a little taste of what it's going to be about. But I started off, we touched on this earlier actually, about Bitcoin. There's no other answer to the current financial system other than Bitcoin. And that's why my new video is called Bitcoin, Humanity's Last Stand Against the Bankers, because the bankers have co-opted the state, governments, politicians, regulatory bodies, justice departments, rating agencies, the whole shebang. They own the entire system. So what can you do? And to me, the last way I can see a way out of this is Bitcoin. So that's why I named it that. And I was also floating this other idea of Bitcoin as the of currencies, and the way that the T1000 liquid terminator prototype, which is similar to Bitcoin, where its prototype is very much an advanced model compared to the T800 bankers. So that's the kind of comparison I'm going to make. And I've basically done 106 years of monetary history, the importance of Bitcoin and how it's going to fight back against all the corruption and fraud we've seen in the financial system. And it's all explained through the Terminator film franchise. And it took me 300 hours to edit over 3 months. And the only problem I'm having right now is that a few of the scenes, like I use clips for the films, like they're not very long, but a few of them are being flagged for copyright at the moment. So I have to go back and re-edit some of the video parts into more of a storyboard type style. So hopefully Christmas, because I promised myself I was going to take a bit of downtime over Christmas. So if I don't do it then, it'll definitely be in Q1. But it's a whole lot of fun. It's just, I think it's the best video I've ever made. It's and I can't wait for people to see it. I'm just gutted I couldn't get it out before tonight, really, but it should be a lot of fun.
300 hours. I mean, you guys got to check this video out. Like he really, Edward really puts the time into these videos, and check it out. He's already got a built-in British accent. So like the narrator part really works for him. Like it actually really works really well, Edward, you narrating all the videos, because it's like it totally makes sense. You do it in this tone that kind of really matches the video itself, like saying like this happened then. It's kind of that kind of stuff. And it's not quite that bad, not quite that much, but it's really great how the tone always matches the video. And in the English accent, it's just smooth. It just everything sounds smoother, it seems, in a British accent. Really cool stuff.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, for sure. And still, my favorite video by far, is the Final Destination one. Like that just kicks so much ass, dude. Like I think my girlfriend too. I think that's her favorite, because we watched a few. She knows a little bit about Bitcoin, but she really liked that one, dude, where Bitcoin was death. On that one, that was just really slick. So really cool. Recommend these videos, guys. Check out his site, and we'll go through now and we'll do the outro now and ask the panelists where we can find them. So Tone, first, where can we find you on the internets?
Best place is probably Twitter at Tone Vase. Yeah, I gotta get used to saying that now. Also my blog, Liberty Life Trail. I cross-post everything. I'm on a couple of podcasts here on this channel with the World Crypto Network. And I also have my own YouTube channel where it's all trading and charting and economics. And that's just Google Tone Vase on YouTube. It's that's about it.
Awesome. Yeah,
I'm not
Tone's
even
got
sure
some
what
good...
the URL is, but
dude, no, yeah, follow Tone on Twitter, because he does do the podcast of the markets. You do I don't know if they're daily, but they're he definitely got a bunch of them. And so Tone talks about the markets in those, and he talks about Bitcoin as well in there, I believe. So the regular markets and Bitcoin. So definitely follow those videos if you're trading the markets or anything like that. You wanna find out some more information. Those videos are great. And then where can we find you, Mr. Renegade Investor? Edward, where can we find you, man?
Yeah, so my website is renegadeinvestor.co.uk. So I use it as a kind of news aggregation site for the Bitcoin articles and videos that I really like. I also put all my own content there, and it also links to my YouTube channel, Renegade Investor, which is where I put all my videos, and that's where I should have hopefully my Terminator video in Q1 of next year. And Twitter as well, sorry. Yeah, Twitter. So my name is @sharkybit, because I absolutely love sharks and I love Bitcoin. So
and Bitcoin is a shark. Bitcoin is a shark, and the banks are swimming in shark-infested waters. So very cool, man. Very cool. So yeah, and of course, you guys can find me on Twitter @the1vortex. We're also in the World Crypto Network Slack chat. So if you guys want to join us in there and talk Bitcoin, where you can always find us in there. Just hit up Mad Bitcoins. And he'll get you in there into the chat, unless you start trying to push Bitcoin Unlimited. Then we probably won't let you in the chat room. No, no, we always welcome discussion. We always welcome the discussion. We love talking Bitcoin. So please, guys, keep talking Bitcoin. Thanks so much, for joining us. Thanks so much to my guests. It's just really late times for Tone. He stays up till past midnight to be on the show, and then we got Edward, who started at 4 in the morning. So we really thank these guys for being on the show and for taking the time to share their information. Thanks so much to everybody in the chat. We love having the conversation. Had a couple trolls in there tonight, but we deal with it. We put them in the timeout. And but we love the discussion. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. We're going to be back again a month from now. We're not going to do the show on the January 2nd, but January 16th will be the next show. So you can catch it right here on the World Crypto Network YouTube channel. So thanks again, guys, so much. We really appreciate the viewers. We really appreciate the chat. We had a great time. And until next time, guys, just keep talking Bitcoin. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.